Thank you, Juan. So I see we have some new faces in the room. So, if you're not familiar with Grid 110, we are an economic and community development nonprofit that is focused on creating clear pathways for success for early stage entrepreneurs. And we typically do this by running cohort-based accelerator programs and providing founders with a growing community of fellow entrepreneurs, expert mentors, and crucial resources. So over the past 10 years, we've supported over 300 companies across many, many different industries, stages, and our portfolio consists of 70% women founders, 77% founders of color, and our alumni have gone on to raise over $123 million in outside capital. So if you are interested to learn a bit more about us, our mission, anything like that, I will pop our website in the chat. Okay, moving on. So today, we are so excited to have Creighton Taylor, who is the co-founder and CEO of Venture Autopilot, and Grid 110 alumni to talk about mastering reporting and how that can be used for investment opportunities and organic growth. So, as a bit of a background, Creighton's journey began in investment management, where he worked with firms such as Western Asset Management and Rochdale Investment Management. And after earning his MBA from Harvard, he pivoted to the startup world and worked with companies such as Spooler and FitSpot. So, like I said before, now he is the co-founder and CEO of Venture Autopilot, which was built to ensure that founders, programs, and investors can make better data-driven decisions. So, Creighton, thank you so much for being here. I know you have an incredible presentation and workshop planned, so I will pass it over to you.
I appreciate the intro, Stell. I'm going to share my screen, and um, kind of walk through this presentation I have prepared here. I have it about me that I'm suddenly I'm suddenly thinking I might skip after that amazing intro. Um, but can you guys see the screen when I enlarge it? Yes? Okay, cool. Um, oh, okay, there we go. So this is kind of the rough agenda talk. I guess I'm probably going to skip the about me, but we'll talk about why reporting matters, reporting components, looking at it from an investor perspective, looking at it from an organic growth perspective, and we're going to have a little exercise. Um, honestly, I'll do a little about me. I think the main thing that's a couple things that are particularly relevant is that Venture Autopilot, what I'm doing with this is I'm looking at how to automate reporting, and how not only to make sure that we get the right metrics, so that we can run our businesses effectively, but using AI because AI feeds on data. And so this is why I think reporting is more important than ever. Just giving AI in a prompt without any context is not that helpful. But if AI knows, okay, we have, five customers, or we have this conversion rate, this is what's working, this is what's not working. How can we pivot or make sure that our sales are landing more effectively? Just having the metrics, that we're feeding it so that it can actually be helpful. I'm sure a lot of you do use ChatGPT or other LLMs just for saving time, because there's just never time when you're trying to run a business. And so I think it's just helpful for running a business. And so that's what I've been looking for. But I also think investors also need to know how things are going, and AI can be helpful for that too. Couple of things also that's not on my LinkedIn. I'm a principal at a venture studio that I do part time. So I'm helping with just churning out ideas constantly, and I do teach on this topic, on managerial finance and venture capital at UC Irvine. And so we just wrapped up the quarter on this as well, where we cover this topic of reporting. So why does reporting matter? Well, we talked about raising funding, stakeholder management. So just getting people in the know of what's happening, with your company. Accountability is huge, so that if you have a goal, making sure that you actually reach that. And then AI is just generally crucial. I have a link to an angel, and I think the link to this presentation is in the chat, or I don't know if you guys can all see that, but there's a link as well to this post. but I'm gonna see if I can't see it. Okay, there we go. So, you know, this is the prominent angel investor. This is not the only post that I've seen on this, but I think it's very relevant. And his quote is, "It doesn't matter if you're currently raising a round. It doesn't matter if you even have investors yet. Create a list of your most important stakeholders, your friends, your family, and heck, even anyone you've ever emailed within your life. Put them on an email thread and start sending them monthly updates." And the context of this post, you'll see the whole thing is that we want to see these updates. Investors want to see these updates far before they're comfortable investing. And so this is really from a perspective of an angel investor. They're looking at growth, not absolute numbers. So they want to see how you've been growing over time, and they want to get comfortable with your organization. So just getting into the habit of reporting, even though it's super annoying, uh, as a founder, I think it's helpful. And trust me, I've had this issue myself, having led companies and had advisory boards. I just didn't, reporting is always kind of an annoying pain point. But it does matter quite a bit. Some of your I guess sort of advocates. It's not only the management team, but also investors, board members, advisors, family, and friends. Is obviously crucial for just knowing if you're hitting your goals. So, set goals, tie them to team members, have deadlines, and have metrics tied to those goals. And so, ideally, you're like, okay, we're going to get this much in sales by this date. We're able to see how we're doing on a month by month basis at the least. And ideally, we're able to make pivots and changes as we come closer to that deadline. And again, this is one of those things where I think in the age of AI, if we have our process kind of streamlined, it can be helpful in figuring out what is the best process to get us to those goals. AI can help. Got Arlen Iverson over here. So AI I use all the time, analyzing trends, comparing to competitors, forecasting financials, sales and marketing recommendations, product recommendations, document creation. I mean, it's really incredible just the progress in the last year of how accurate it can be. And obviously, we're working with limited resources, limited employees. I use it for brainstorming constantly for just looking at different ideas on how to get to that product market fit if I'm not there, and ways to grow the business. And so again, feeding these metrics is going to be really, really important, and being super, super detailed on what those are and knowing what those are is just going to be, again, just really, really helpful for getting specific recommendations and getting specific outputs that are really helpful for the business. Some common performance metrics that I at least been looking at is KPIs. So those are the key performance indicators. Those are the main things that you're looking at for your business. Financial metrics, that's kind of your income statement, balance sheet, things like that investors often like to look at. Uh, Customer metrics, what's your retention rate? What's your net promoter score? And kind of what is the core? Are you actually providing core value to your customers? Operational, if you have if you're doing a physical product, then this is going to be huge for productivity and quality control. Growth metrics are huge. Seeing how the growth funnel is performing, and I have a slide on that, on what that looks like. And then how employee metrics, if you have employees, how is that performing? And more, there's the idea of AI agents acting like employees. And so how are those performing if we're going to be hiring AI to help with our businesses? So I have an actual example of this. So we're going to go through this a little bit more detail later. But um, some of the common sources of data, maybe you don't have a lot of data coming in quite yet. Maybe you don't have these things set up. But eventually, you usually have something set up here where you have accounting software of some kind. QuickBooks is by default, I think, the most popular for small businesses. Analytics software, Google Analytics is probably the most popular for that. Payment
I'm
process.
on a Zoom.
Go ahead. Oh, okay. Payment processing, CRM, so like HubSpot and social media. All these have reporting capabilities of some kind, and they're all sources of crucial data for your business. Analytics particularly has a lot of information that a lot of people sleep on. And we'll kind of go through some of these things in a minute. So I'll just give a few examples of the KPIs that kind of make sense, at least from an investor's perspective, and certainly from a founder's perspective. Revenue, net income is huge. Number of active users is often huge for B2C products. Retention rate, um, how many customers are staying. Lifetime value of a customer and customer acquisition costs are huge for investors, especially maybe seed and Series A level, because lifetime value of a customer is how much estimated revenue a customer pays over their entire lifetime. So if a customer pays you on average $1,000 a year, and they on average stay for 2 years, then your LTV would be $2,000 because it'd be $1,000 times two. For customer acquisition costs, that's how much it costs to acquire a customer. However, you're doing that. So that might be sales, that might be ads, that might be events. All these things cost money. All your sales and marketing costs divided by each customer you acquire is your customer acquisition costs. So investors often want to compare lifetime value of a customer divided by customer acquisition costs because it's basically saying if I pay on average $1,000 for a new customer, but on average they pay $2,000. That's an LTV to CAC ratio of 2, and that's good because that means for every dollar that we're spending, we're getting $2 back from our customers. So this is just really great for measuring the how efficiently we're acquiring our customers on the sales and marketing side. And a lot of investors want to look at that if they want to give you money. They want to see how you're going to, allocate that money to actually get customers efficiently. So getting this set up early is going to be great for potentially having that conversation with an investor that says, "Hey, we've tried these different acquisition channels. We know it works. This is what our metrics look like." Number of customers is huge, and North Star metric is also a increasingly popular metric, which is really a primary metric reflecting the value add that your service provides. So as an example, and let me just show you, I'll show you North Star metrics here, and I'll go back up. So for North Star metrics, these might be different for different companies. For Facebook, it might be monthly active users because they're looking at engagement. For Spotify, it might be time spent listening. For Amazon, it might be number of purchases per month. Airbnb book nights. So it's just different metrics. I know for Slack, not only do they do daily active users, but they also look at messages sent. So it really might just depend on your company. But the idea is that these are leading indicators of your company's performance, and revenue is actually a lagging indicator. And so more and more, there's teams that focus on growth, that are focused on this metric, as well as investors that are focused on this metric, maximizing this metric, because it's again indicating that you are doing well before the revenue starts to plummet. So that's really what investors often want to see. Okay, are you actually providing value to your clients in whatever way, shape, or form? And then hopefully, the revenue will follow on later. And then I kind of skipped this. This is the LTV to CAC ratio we talked about. These are some formulas for how to calculate LTV and CAC. We already talked a little bit about this on how this makes sense. But again, LTV to CAC is just really about how efficient you are in acquiring customers. If it's under 1, that's not good. You're not profitably acquiring customers. And if it's over 3, that is maybe that's great, but that also means that you probably can put more money behind that channel. Talked about North Star metric, and also just want to talk about the growth funnel. So this is just the default, I think, growth funnel that a lot of product managers use at some sort of larger companies, but also just a general, just a general funnel that might be a good idea to look at. What does the awareness look like? How many people are you reaching with your product or service? For acquisition, how many people are actually signing up? Really, I think ultimately, activation. How many people are taking that important first step? What does your retention look like? And then let's just skip to what does your referrals look like. So going from people knowing about your product to ultimately loving your product and referring it. And ideally, they're referring that, and it goes back up to acquisition, so you have a growth loop going. But these metrics are also some things that investors might look at, and also might be things that may are good to track for your company. And then burn rate, I'm sure you guys know all these things. I'm just going over the terms because I have a spreadsheet that has these terms. Burn rate is basically how much cash you're spending per month, largely your fixed expenses. So ideally, if you're obviously sort of just starting out, you're going to try to keep that burn rate low until you understand until you have product market fit, until you kind of find your market. So that's kind of the intro there. I have a document here which indicates some of the things that I've been looking at automating myself, but hopefully is something that could be helpful for how you might think about this yourselves. I've done this also for other companies where we've had just a simple dashboard of just this tab that indicates, in this case, January 30th. This is a monthly report, right? So this it's not parallel here, but for each month, what are your primary key performance indicators and how are they changing? Which is basically what this formula is. We don't have this month in, but you want to track how is your revenue changing? How is this changing? Lifetime value per customer. These are just the primary metrics: signups, new customers. This is North Star metric. So a lot of people, a lot of companies will have their own dashboard. Maybe it's only five things that you're focusing on. This is maybe overkill, perhaps, but because it really depends on what you're focused on. But usually there's only like 5 to 10 metrics that you're really focused on, and you want to have a dashboard like this that, at the very least, on Excel, you're putting in manually, or you might just be pulling it from your whatever software you're using. Uh, Again, some of the key performance indicators, big ones are revenue. North Star metric is getting more popular. Average revenue per customer, LTV, CAC, number of customers. These are all huge. Active users sometimes this can be pretty important. So this is just a spreadsheet that perhaps could be useful. Runway is if you have money and you want to make sure that you got enough time that you're to live until before the startup fails. Gross profit is also pretty important. There's some sales metrics on open rates of your emails that you send out, click rates. So these are just ideas that you might take the spreadsheet. Perhaps you take out, you know, 80% of these things and you focus on only certain things. And maybe this is what you start with. If you want to go overkill, there's also a financial tab, which is essentially this is a basic income statement and balance sheet that if you use QuickBooks, you can essentially pull from QuickBooks. Um, and so this is just the last few months, and then maybe you have a forecast as well. Um, but again, this may be overkill, especially if you don't have QuickBooks set up. But you definitely want to have an understanding of your main metric, which is kind of revenue, gross profit, things like that. Those are all really important. Core value is stuff like retention rate, who are your top customers by revenue, things like that. Growth metrics is where I kind of alluded to before. I'm going to skip over to, so these are coming from Google Search Console. So this is example of the terms that are the top search terms and how many impressions you have for SEO. But so you can actually use Google Search Console for this. So that's it's not part of Google Analytics, but it's also something that's part of the Google Suite. But I guess the main thing I wanted to show is that Google Analytics just has a lot of data. I put this into a spreadsheet, but you can also look at this data directly from Google Analytics or whatever analytics platform. And that is how are people accessing your website? What is the operating system they're using? What are the top cities? What are the top regions? What are the top countries, languages, the top pages people um, are visiting? What does the acquisition channels look like? You can actually get some of this from Google Analytics. So there's a lot of stuff right out of the box in Google Analytics alone. as well as other analytics platforms that could be helpful for getting to if there's one of these things that's really important for you, maybe this is part of your KPIs. And that's really the main things I wanted to go over here. This external piece is really the competitor analysis. If you want to keep track of your competitors and what their market share looks like, what their funding looks like, revenue, headcount, things like that. But um, I just wanted to share this as an example. But often what I've done, I actually created this for a client um, that is that's a startup. A lot of people just starting out, they just have one tab, they have a KPI tab, and they're just tracking on a monthly basis, and they share that with people like investors, prospective investors, could be board members, advisory board members, friends, family, things like that. There is a lot of things going on in the chat. So, is there like questions? I just seen a ton of things. Um,
Creighton, there's one that I think is that Erica had. So can you speak to the idea of I'm starting out, right? So I think there's two parts to this particular question. One, is it assumed that a company that has a lower cost of customer acquisition costs is doing better, right? Is the goal to have the lowest? And what is the relationship between CAC and LTV? And then how does that differ for new companies when you're starting off? Right. So if I'm starting off, which a lot of organizations do, they put a lot of money to get in front of a lot of potential customers.
right,
Right.
right,
So you, with your investor lens, someone comes to you and we're taking tons of money to get in front of users.
right.
I see you smiling because
No, yeah, yeah, no, they're all
so
good questions.
yeah, so
So
let's talk about that. That threw like six things at you. I'll shut up now.
no, it's all good. I just saw a lot of activity in the chat, so I thought I would just take a break. Um, no, it's a good question. So I think less less important is the level at which your CAC is at, and more important is the relationship between LTV and CAC. Because if you have a high price, say you're selling luxury cars, right? Like that, your customer acquisition cost is going to be still, pretty high. But the context is that ideally, people are paying a high price for the product. So it can be high because the relationship is that you're paying a lot of money to get in front of people, and then they're going to pay you a lot of money. So the relationship between LTV and CAC is a big thing. Just starting out, like when you're super early, it's almost too early to tell because some of the stuff you're doing as a founder, and you can almost apply your hourly rate to the amount of time that you're spending on just getting customers, because that's essentially what you're going to do when you have a sales team. So when you have a sales team, part of your customer acquisition cost is the cost of the salary, the commission for the sales team. And so you're the sales team starting out, and it's really about, okay, how much time does it take for you to get that one customer, and how much are they paying? And so starting out is definitely not going to be a positive LTV to CAC ratio if you're looking at it that way, because you're unknown. There's a lot of things that you're still figuring out. But I think that relationship is still how you want to kind of think about it. And you want to think about, okay, well, what is the acquisition channels, the customers that I can spend the least amount of time, least amount of money to get the most amount of value. And then from there, when you start to feel like, okay, we might be onto something. That's when we start measuring this and start showing this in pitch decks. That's how I would think about it. So
I
let
have
me. Go ahead.
Creighton, when you were speaking earlier, I think it was one thing, and there's a few of our alumni founders here I've had conversations with that I think may be relevant to them. And it's funny because in our program we're going to be doing KPIs and things like that, like I think in a few weeks.
Oh,
So
no.
this is very timely. Um, can you just talk a little bit about picking the right metric? Because, as you know, if I'm using a metric, let's say revenue,
Yeah.
how do I know as a company that We are in the right direction, going in the right direction. We are attracting customers. Our revenue is growing, but our LTV is in the trash. So people come to us, they use us once, they pay it once, but they don't, right? Like we're great at getting first time customers, but we suck at getting return customers. And how
Right.
as a founder, I can look at my revenue and use that as a metric to think that what we're doing works. And then at some point we know something changes and we no longer can attract those folks. So can you talk about like how to ensure that you're leveraging data in the right way?
Yeah, and I think this is also why reporting is kind of helpful just as an exercise because it gets you in the mindset to think about this a little bit more. I think especially after any investor that's been around for a while knows has some story of some startup they invested in that got a lot of initial revenue and traction and then they just fell off, which is basically what you're saying. So I wanted to pull this slide back up again because I think there is a lot of companies that are really good at building awareness and getting people to try the product and maybe even paying for the product, but the retention isn't there. And so investors are going to be definitely looking at that retention piece, which is very much tied to LTV. Because if you look at this LTV formula, churn rate is right here. This is a big factor. So churn is the flip side of retention. Retention. So your retention rate is 95% a year. The churn is 5%. It's the other one minus retention rate. So you want to maximize this retention rate. This is super super important for investors because they want to know that if you do get that customer, they're going to stay and they're going to be happy. And it's not enough to just pour money in and get people to try it, and then maybe they don't try it again. Maybe the next time maybe they pay money, but then the next time your marketing is actually getting worse and worse because they tried and they didn't like it, or for whatever reason they just didn't want to don't want to return. So it's actually harder to get them to come back than to have them be an unknown of someone who doesn't know anything about your product to try it once. So this retention factor is huge. And this is, I think, a major metric that companies should be looking out for. Ultimately, if you don't have anything in the pipeline, I think obviously you just need to get some initial customers. But at least my inclination is to just start a little slow on this, make sure that you're getting a great experience, and have a little more modest metrics on revenue to make sure you're getting that retention or referral is actually somewhat high. That I think is a far better indicator for investors and for the health of the business than to have a ton of stuff at the top of the funnel, but a very, very low retention and referral rate. Um, so let me go over a couple of things and then we can decide how we want to proceed because I saw there's a lot of stuff in the chat. We have questions here so we can return to questions, but we were just left off here in reporting. Here is reporting for investors. I just wanted to do a couple things and then we have an exercise. And then we can kind of maybe go back into questions and answers and discussions because I don't feel like I have all the answers here. I think a lot of these things are just open questions and things to think about. So just a couple slides. Reporting on investors. I think it's important to note we just talked a little bit about retention and how that's huge. Literally, literally what we just talked about, right? Investors don't just look at revenue. They want leading indicators for growth. And growth there's a number of ways that we can measure that. So if you do have these inflated revenue numbers, but you don't have the retention rate, that's going to be a red flag. And they want, again, anything that if you have reports that are timely, that is good indicator that you know what you're doing, you know how to run the business, you are competent, you are trustworthy to give money to. So I think these are all really, really huge factors. Um, some of the common mistakes that I've seen talking to investors is that there is a lot of focus on vanity metrics. That's literally what we just talked about. Vanity metrics being, hey, there's a lot of people who follow us on Facebook or whatever, Instagram, probably Facebook, shows you my age. Vanity, just like, follows us on social media. There's a lot of people who are signing up to the product, but we're not getting a lot of revenue, or maybe we're not getting a high retention rate. So we need to look at the core business health. What does that recurring revenue number look like? And then in terms of consistency, ideally you want to have you want to start a process and keep it. So if you do a report for 1 month, hopefully you're doing that the next month and you're doing it on a timely basis. Otherwise, you have gaps, and that's not great. And ideally, I think what's great is if you have, you're sending out reports with some things that might be things that they can do to help. Maybe it's a referral agreement that you have with people who are receiving these reports where they get commission for getting you clients. Maybe it's things that you're kind of struggling with that you might need help with, people that you want to talk to, maybe someone you want to hire. Just things that are actionable, I think are really great as well. And investors, if they can see that you have this down, I think this is all just really, really all positive signs. And then for organic growth, it's just really helpful to understand when you want to pivot or when you want to double down. And even within a space, when you have a hypothesis on maybe a problem that you're solving, there's a lot of ways you can pivot on what the solution is for that same problem. So it's not like a huge pivot thing it doesn't have to be a 180, but sometimes you just need to change your approach to sales or marketing or whatever it is that you're trying to do. I think it's also really great for identifying bottlenecks. We just talked about the growth funnel. Tracking customer behavior. Google Analytics is great for that. So, setting up analytics. I use Google Analytics by default, so that's why I say Google Analytics, but any analytics platform is just really great for that. Just getting it set up right away with like one line of code on your website, just or plug in, that gets you a ton of data. And then you can add custom events where you can track all kinds of behavior across the funnel on how they're using your product and who is using your product. Um, we talked about KPIs and accountability, and again, AI. I really feel like this AI factor is a major, major thing, and this is why I'm particularly excited about reporting today. Reporting today is a lot broader to me than just getting the right numbers. I think getting the right numbers that you're looking at is step one, and then now, okay, we're going to try to plug into our AI tools how we're going to make this a competitive advantage against the competitors and to win and provide more value to our customers. So I really think AI, especially obviously you just lever yourself like crazy. I think the key to that is just plugging in your data efficiently on where you are, where you're stuck, what's going well, and automating all those processes that might take a little bit longer if you don't have that data. Okay, so I think it might be a good idea to do the exercise now, and and then we can kind of return to an open discussion. So I wanted to spend ten minutes on this exercise. I'm going to read through this, and then we're going to break out groups of three people each, and we're going to discuss these four questions. So the exercise is: you are the CEO of a direct-to-consumer e-commerce startup that sells eco-friendly home goods, such as reusable kitchenware and sustainable cleaning products. Your company launched a year ago and has been steadily growing through online sales, influencer partnerships, and paid social media ads. You're preparing for your monthly advisory board meeting, which is scheduled for early March, and you need to pull and present key metrics for the period of February. This is the February month. What are the key 5 metrics that you would choose that you want to present? How would you source this data? And this is obviously you might have to make some assumptions on how you're actually operating here. But how would you source the data for each of these metrics? How would you present these metrics to co-founders, board members, and investors? How would that differ across these three groups? And then would you feed this data to AI to help grow your business? How would you do that if you do that? How would AI potentially help you once you do have these metrics? So maybe that's a good next step is to spend 10 minutes on that. And I'll just so you know, this is in the presentation. I think you guys have a link to that presentation, so hopefully you can use that link and reference this in your groups. But hopefully you can spend 10 minutes on that, and then we'll come back together and share some insights. So maybe Estelle, help me out with that one.
All right, you should all have the invites. Perfect.
All right, so I don't know if volunteers want to raise your hand. Maybe you can have a few representatives talk about what they talked about, their answers to the question. Oh, okay, we got some chat activity. Wow, this is very well thought out. Keisha, you wanna touch on this a little bit more? Talk to this that you put in the chat. Uh, Keisha, hello.
Somebody muted me.
Oh, okay. Sorry,
I think one of the persons in our group was gonna read it.
oh, okay.
Hmm.
Who is that? So we can have them.
No idea.
Oh,
I
okay.
had,
All right. So
they need
maybe
to come off of mute.
So we kind of talked about a little bit. I think that I mean this is not necessarily our work, you know. What I was talking about is for the metrics, we would probably need to watch out for look at customer acquisition costs, of
yeah,
course. Lifetime value is kind of related to that, so looking at that. And then just some other things, of course, like you're spending money on sales, right? So you would need like a sales conversion rate, figuring out how successful you are with that.
yeah,
Um, those are things that I can think of right off the bat. As far as metrics. Um,
yeah, yeah. No, it's all great, and I think gross profit margin is huge, especially for e-commerce. So I see that
okay.
here in the chat as well. Just because for physical products, there's always a question on how much of a markup you can actually sustainably have. So that's also good. So appreciate that. Appreciate that. Anyone else want to share what they talked about?
I do want to share about how AI was able to help us. You notice that we only had just a few minutes, but look of all that AI helped us
I
accomplish.
definitely recognize the AI, but it's all good.
Look, Juan, you got his hand up.
Say, won't he do it? Won't he do it?
Oh yeah, he'll do it, honey.
We did the same thing in our group. Before we even started talking, we threw the prompt into ChatGPT and it generated all of our responses so we could have a discussion about the different points that we needed to talk about. And so we also compared responses on known chats that know the business, your personal business versus those that are on the free version. And there
Yeah.
were some differences in the responses, which we actually thought was interesting too. And while we covered this information, we spent a lot of the time kind of digging into how AI could benefit our organizations to help us grow and scale and like navigate the landscape. And I think I may have, yeah, Lauren and Randall, I think I may have turn their consideration into acquisition, all things considered, and getting their buy-in with ChatGPT and AI tools.
And so this is great. And it's all good points. And so Erica, I'm just wondering for you guys, did you guys think about did you, I guess cover what are the limitations, I guess, because with just putting this into ChatGPT now? Because I think there's I guess this I'm going to get to like how are you sourcing this data, right? And making sure that the data is accurate and good. And do you guys touch on that at all, or
We didn't as a team, but for me, I totally believe in ChatGPT. I believe in AI hallucinations and all the things and making sure that you're putting in clean data and like fact checking it and not taking everything verbatim. I think I'm in a little bit of a different position because we use the paid model. So we've created our own GPTs to help that's learned our business. And so while yes, there are still some mistakes being made, I can more easily identify the mistakes and the things that aren't in alignment. But one of the things I was sharing with my group is, we built a GPT to help us one build our business plan And then
Hmm.
after 2 years of being in business, we now have data and metrics to vet against the business plan. The business plan is now outdated, so we're now writing a new 3-year plan based
Okay.
on data and actuals in the tool. But then I also have used it to help with some revenue modeling scenarios because I don't always have the spreadsheets or the informations or the inputs to include into a spreadsheet. So working with, we call him Chad, so him on it. But then also in helping to write formulas to create spreadsheets. I know I want it to function like X. What are some of the ways that I can accomplish that? Help me write the formula so I can get the outcome that I'm after. Little things to try to
Yeah.
help us
No,
scale
that's
and build our
fantastic.
business.
So it's fantastic, awesome use of GPTs. We didn't cover that at all, and that's really, really helpful. I'm sure other people have some ideas thinking about that. And just training, on some initial data and updating it. Awesome, awesome stuff there. So yeah, that's really helpful. I think I don't know if there's like one other person that wants to share. One brought something to my attention that I feel like I probably should bring up, which is how do we think about kind of metrics before launch when you're super early on. That's probably worth a conversation. But just on this topic, I just want to make sure. I just want to see if there's anybody else that wants to kind of touch on what they talked about as well.
Only thing I wanted to say, Creighton, is I know that we're leveraging a lot of AI tools, but I think the other part that I think will be really interesting when you hop off is thinking of like, where are you going to get this data from?
Mm,
And as you build, you need to have systems as you build and you create that you can, if you don't have it in place, thinking about this stuff in place, it's going to be hard for you to get the data from. So, right. So if you're thinking about like year over year, all of that stuff is like, all right, cool. Then I need to go into my Shopify store and like really having all of the places clearly identified of where you get which data point, right?
yeah.
Because if you're doing revenue data, then having that like, so I think thinking about all the different places and all the different tools that you'll have to leverage to pull in all the data. I think that's as I was thinking about this example too, Creighton, this is a really good one because I think it's applicable to a lot of founders that we work with. So thanks for this. I'm gonna use this in next week's session. Lauren, don't say nothing to nobody. I made this up, Lauren. It didn't come from Creighton. It's from Juan's brain. So thanks, Creighton.
But no, no, I mean, I think that's all good. The way that I like to think about this is to think about to start with the end in mind. So what is it that we actually need? Which I think is what we got with this. You put this into ChatGPT, you get a prompt. This is what we need. Great. But how do we make sure that we're this is accurate, all that stuff? And it's to your point, it's like, okay, well, now we need to back into what systems we need, how we're going to set things up so we can look ahead. Like we're doing stuff now that 6 months from now is creating that amazing, perfect output that gets you money, gets you raising money, or helps you run your business. So I think that's how I also kind of think about it, even if you're sort of early on, just knowing what the outcome looks like, what the ideal pitch deck looks like, what the ideal report looks like, what the ideal whatever it is, spreadsheet, how you think about it. And then you can back into, okay, well, how do we set these things up now? So that we can kind of lead up to this. But I also want to mention Juan mentioned a great point about like for early stage, if you're pre-launch, what are some of the metrics you should look into? And I neglected to mention a few things that kind of make sense. I think my default is customer interviews, especially early on, pre-revenue. I think to some degree for B2C products, when you have a lot of traction, it might be users, but um, to me, validating a problem with deep have deep conversations, taking notes that you're actually that they actually have a problem that your solution will likely solve. I think it's a really, 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 really great metric. I know a billion-dollar founder that says you want to. He had a billion dollar exit. He had another $1 million plus exit. I don't know what it was the second one, but it was in the tens of millions or something like that. And his whole thing is you want to get 100 plus customer interviews, all of them validating that this is a painkiller, not a vitamin. So this is a very, very annoying problem for them that they're willing to pay for. Um, and and then from there, that's where you kind of if you can validate that and you have a team, that alone could be something that you raise off of. But at the very least, that's something that you can build personas off and you can build a business around. So that might be a metric in terms of how many deep validated so sort of problem conversations you've had. And so that you have that ready so that they're ready to purchase when you're ready to launch your product or service.